All right. It says we're recording, so don't say anything incriminating now.
Yeah.
Um, but well, have you been able to do anything social? Like, what's your guys' social world been about? Would you say
Family.
family?
Yeah. So
And
I
that's
feel like
Northern Virginia, right?
Northern Virginia.
Mostly.
Yeah. And I will. We have like a few friends that we'll see periodically in a socially distanced way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have found like I'll go on walks with people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is
That's
something that's
nice.
very comfortable with me,
Yeah.
which is interesting because typically in the winter time, I'm not going outside very much. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, it's winter. I'm inside now.
Mm-hmm.
But this year, I've been like, oh, like it's okay, like because I want to like see people and because I want to be out of my apartment sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm more willing to go outside when it's cold out. So I think that that's an interesting kind of shift,
Mm-hmm.
realizing that I'm also an animal and I can be outside in all
Mm-hmm.
seasons
Mm-hmm.
with the proper gear. So yeah, there's that.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean it's interesting because it's like that was when I lived in New York, that was my favorite way of hanging out with people was just like taking long walks, like walk and talks.
Yeah,
So, you know, that's
then
cool.
they're coming back.
So you've been able to see your family a little bit, or is it mostly virtual?
Yeah, so like my immediate family and Reese's immediate family, like that's kind of like our hub of like people
Hmm.
that we are like going into spaces with and
Gotcha.
not as
Like you
intimate.
trust them and they trust you and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's why we have been also pretty strict about social distancing
Right.
outside of home,
Yeah,
just because I have
totally.
family members that are high risk, and Reese's sister's pregnant, so like
Oh,
we've been with her through this whole like pregnancy thing, and that's another thing where we want to be super careful about.
nice.
So
Hmm.
uh, yeah,
Gotcha.
that
Where's Reese's family?
same Northern Virginia,
Oh,
different part
also,
of Virginia, but everyone is up there for the
gotcha.
most. Yeah,
Okay. Do they come to you or do you mostly go up there?
we mostly go up there.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it is when you're like the kid with the small apartment, but I thought I'd still
Right. This
ask.
is the reason why I'm like, I'm ready for a house because I need y'all
Yeah.
to see me as an adult human that has
Let me
things
tell
to
you
do.
something, Sid. Like, don't hold your breath. I'm not presuming anything, but like if your path is anything like mine, oh my God. I still have a house, but it took me so long to get one that like they still in their brain just see me as the kid with the dirty small apartment.
And they just like won't even come.
Well, it's just like hardwired, but
Yeah,
whatever.
that is, yeah, I know that's kind of how my parents. My
I
parents
yeah.
like move an apartment I had three years ago, and that's
Mhm.
like where they see.
That's where they sit. Yeah, I could totally. That's my. I'm not surprised. Yeah, it's funny, right?
Yeah. Where are you from originally?
I grew up. I was born in like the suburbs, or I guess like exurbs. I don't even know the right language. Outside of New York City, I was born, and then I grew up mostly out in the suburbs, like proper suburbs of Philadelphia, and and then yeah, that was my whole life. Like my parents live in Philly now,
Okay.
so not too far away. But I haven't seen them the entire pandemic. I haven't seen my
Oh,
parents.
you've just been strict
Well,
on that.
because like we don't have anywhere to stay if we visited them because they are being, pretty strict. And like I guess we could probably stay with them if we like really seriously did like a 2 week or, a big quarantine and then got tested. But
Yeah.
it's also just kind of a lot. Like my parents are great and all, but like what are we gonna do in Philly for like if we're gonna spend that much time to quarantine, then you feel like you gotta like be there for a while and then I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and they have each other. Like Katie's parents are split up, and so we've actually seen them a bit because like they're both like just like alone in their New York City apartments, and
Yeah.
so we've like helped them and been seeing, and like had outside hangouts with them over the course of the pandemic. But my parents are just like living their lives, doing their like blissed out retired thing,
Oh, that's good though. It's good that they have each other
big time. Yeah, I'm not gonna live.
right
So
now.
yeah. Um, Well, so yeah, what kind of stuff have you been up to?
Um, well, I guess when I had reached out to you, I was telling you about the things that I had learned about my like ancestors. So
Yeah.
last year, I kind of like started getting more into uh, learning
Hmm.
about where I come from, or like the people that came before me,
Yeah.
and listening. Like I told you, I still have only listened to the first interview. It's really hard.
Oh my God. Wait,
Like,
you listened to the very first one? Was that the one that you did with Victor?
hmm?
Was the first interview you did was with Victor, right?
Mm, if it was, I
You
don't
don't even
have.
remember it, probably. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I could have sworn that there's one interview in the very beginning with Victor, and then I interviewed you a bunch of times.
I think that you're right. I don't have the one with Victor. I don't have
Let me look. But anyway, keep going.
the
So
first.
this is cool. I really want to hear about this.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm grateful for like the documentation, but it is hard to go back and listen to oneself
Oh,
from a
big time. I mean, it's awesome that you did it because, like, yeah. I mean, I want to hear what your impression is of yourself. So let's just start there.
yeah, I mean, one, it definitely brings to forefront the inner critic because I'm just like, oh my god, like this, like why would you say this? Like, but like beyond getting beyond that, it's like I was saying, I was amazed, and I'm sure that I'm sure I'm not alone in this like mentality of just like, especially being in college, but just this confidence in like that I know so much about what I'm talking about because I am getting this college education. Like I think that there's something in that in there that's like, so it was really interesting to hear me talk about just all my plans for business. And also helpful though, because it helped remind me some of those like seed
Mm,
thoughts that like that had me started, where like
hmm.
I remember like, and one of the things that I said was like I never want to work for anyone ever again. Like
Hmm.
I'd rather work twice as hard for myself than like
Hmm.
work for someone else. Um,
Wait, so
which
talk about that. So yeah, so like, um, and because I'll be honest, like, you are not the only person that said that or something like that. You know what I mean? And so, what does it feel like hearing that? How many years later? My God, like, what is it? Three, maybe?
it was
5 years? Holy shit. Oh, man, this
that
has been
was
a
in,
long time. Okay, that's amazing. So, half a decade later, what does it feel like to hear you be like, I am never working for somebody again?
well, it's ridiculous because I've worked for a lot of other people since then. Like, because there have been periods of time where I needed the money. Like, there's
Hmm.
no way to do it. Like, I
Hmm.
wasn't bringing enough money on my own. I had to
Hmm.
go and work for other people. Each time I did that, I did come to the same the same thought, like the same realization, like I could be working for myself. Like I could be using this time to do what I'm trying to do instead of washing these dishes that I really like, don't want to wash other people's dishes right now. Um, which I'm sure anyone who has to do that feels that way, right? Like it's a privilege to be able to step into a space where you could do something other than that. And I also recognize that at this point now. Um, but I think that like over the past like 5 or 4 years, I go through phases of, yeah, like I want to work twice as hard for myself and just like grind and do this. And then there's burnout with that. And I'm like, I actually want someone to just tell me what to do. I want to plug in somewhere and like get paid for it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Right. That makes a
I,
lot of sense.
yeah, I
So it
think,
goes back and forth between like, man, why am I doing this work for somebody else? And ugh, it's so hard to be like my own boss.
yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. And it's a lot of, obviously it's a lot of work, but there's just a lot of different pieces that you have to be thinking about a lot. Like it's because when you're doing it for yourself, you're like the marketing person, you're also the accountant in a lot of ways, and then you're also creating the product or providing the service, you know, so there's so many different jobs that you have to do on your own. And one thing that a lot of the jobs that I've worked for still small businesses. So I've worked underneath a business owner, you know? And one thing that I've noticed with a lot of them is the further along that they are, it seems all of those like fragmenting your attention and your energy in all those different roles. I haven't met someone yet that has been doing it for a long period of time that doesn't seem like their psyche is a little fractured, or like they're not a little manic because there's like so many things that they're paying attention to, you know. And so that is something that I don't want to become. I in ways already embody it because I have like because that's what is like required. So there's that's something I'm aware of and trying to figure out, okay, so how do you do it in a way that's sustainable? But then it's like capitalism, is it sustainable? Like is it, I don't
So can you run me down just like what if you could think of like the 5 years of jobs, what have they been? What have the working for others jobs been?
Yeah. I mean, like, I worked around like the first interview that we did, I was already working at a wellness center. So that's like one that I worked at. I worked at multiple coffee shops. I worked at like Brewers Cafe, and they had just opened at that time.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I was like in there like when there was nothing in there, and then like it kind of built up. I also worked at Gather Home and Garden, which is now Pomona Coffee and Plants. Gather Home and Garden was the best job.
Oh, like, really? Tell me why.
Because it didn't require much work. It was a plant shop. It was a very small plant nursery, and my job was essentially to be there. The owner would have to do other things sometimes. So again, it was like she was the owner, and I was like helping her out. And so I would sit in there. People would come in. They would have questions about plants. Sometimes I could answer them, and then they would leave. But most of the time, I was just in there with plants. And Melissa was okay with me like doing writings and reading, whatever I was trying to do. So that
sounds really nice.
It was a really, really nice time. Of course, it was a filler. Like I was doing other jobs in order to pay rent. Like it wasn't paying my rent.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what were you doing at the same time as that job? Do you remember?
Running, teaching. So like at that time, and we've talked about it before, but like there was a period of time where I was trying to do yoga as like as the business.
Yeah.
And I did tea in the holidays. Every year since I started Roots, I've done tea at the holiday time, year round. So I was doing yoga. I was teaching. Probably around that time, I was teaching like 8 to 12 classes a week along with these shifts.
Right, and I remember you telling me about the economics of the yoga instructor stuff, but it was like you get paid like per student that shows up or something. Yeah, well, nothing was the bottom line, but
you get paid per class. So at that time, I was probably making around $25 an hour.
Okay.
So like in your mind, you think, because I also worked at like Lululemon where you get paid $13 an hour. So, but the class, like, you know, like you don't get like
right in between.
Yeah, like that's over the course of a week.
Yeah.
And also like just providing, for me personally, being one person, providing a service as like your full means of income is not sustainable. Like that means I am the commodity. Like my time, my energy, my body is the commodity that I'm selling.
Yeah. That's how it felt, huh?
That's how it felt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I was getting migraines every week. And I couldn't, I was like, okay, like I can't.
And what do you attribute, like, what was, like, diagnose that? Like, why were you getting migraines every week?
Well, I mean, I guess migraines, I have had to come to the realization that migraines is a disability that I live with. So there are multiple things
That trigger it?
trigger that, but I think in that time where it was like teaching class after class after class for a whole week, it was just putting my body through more physical exertion and then not actually taking care of it as the main source of my so dehydration was probably a big part of it, honestly. And then interacting with a lot of different humans.
When you say interacting with a lot of people, you're feeling like that would have also contributed to the migraine triggers?
I think in ways, yeah, but it's more subtle. I think just energetically. And in that position, it's like people are coming for something.
Yeah.
You know, so but it's with teaching in general. It is an energy expenditure.
Oh my God. Yeah. Tell me about it. I mean, I know, I absolutely know. And I could only imagine how much energy it takes to be a yoga instructor, like energetic, like psychically, and just sort of like to be that presence must be exhausting.
Yeah, it can be. And because I don't know, I do still respect it as a spiritual practice. I don't know if it's something that is meant to be like commodified or tried to made mass scale in that way of just like, you know,
so do you feel, yeah. Do you feel like your relationship with yoga has shifted over the last few years?
Yeah. At this point, I don't offer anything and call it yoga. Because I think that there's so much cultural appropriation of it. And I know enough to know that I don't know enough to like say, I'm teaching you yoga in its true essence.
Totally.
You know, so that's kind of
totally.
I teach at this point. I say teach mindfulness in movement, mindfulness and movement, because I feel like that is something I can confidently say I can teach you these things, and it's influenced by yoga. A lot of what I've learned is from yoga, but there's so much depth to a 5,000-year-old practice.
Yes. Yes, that makes sense. Now I'm curious, listening to you say this now, when you were listening to that first interview, I believe at the time you were branding yourself Sid the Yogini.
Yeah.
How does that feel to you now?
That's like one of the things I've changed that since then. Like I don't have that website.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get people to realize that I don't have that email anymore. But I mean, I understand why I did it, and it made sense for like what I was trying to do. But then I'm like, oh, that is cultural. that's appropriation. That's what I did. And I mean, I think that is just a learning curve. And it's still happening. Like I see that name a lot. Like whatever the name is, the Yogini. Like I still see it a lot, but I just am like, I don't resonate so much.
That sounds healthy. So you're just like, yeah, it made sense that me at that time would do that, but now me at this time is like, okay, I can move past it.
Yeah, and it was like for just like a personal thing, it felt really limiting because it builds up. And at that time, like you said, I was branding myself. I do not want to be a brand, personally. I that's what I have learned, at least like in that front. Like, I don't want to be that, because people put this expectation of like who you are because you have branded yourself as this person. And so then it leaves little room for like growth or change or evolution as like a human, which I need to change. Change has to happen. So and I felt that people were kind of putting this persona, or I was trying to live this persona of being like calm and peaceful in the place where you can come to like feel better. And I'm like, no, I am a person with a whole range of emotions, and I definitely have like anger and like frustration and like sadness, like all these other things that I need to be able to.
All these off-brand emotions.
Yeah, like
that's funny. Yeah, it's like, Sid, I'm noticing you're a little bit angry. That's off-brand. Can you just chill the fuck out?
right.
That's pretty funny. Okay, so when you, in the beginning, when you were like, I'm washing dishes, feeling like, why am I not working on myself? Which job were you calling back in your brain? I'm just curious.
Oh, well, okay, so Gather Home and Garden, the job that was like great and I loved it, she wanted to expand, you know? And so they ended up buying I can't remember the name of it. You may have even like been there before. It was like, it's on Venable Street, and it used to be like a coffee shop, soda bar, and then he had like brooms. Anyway, they bought brooms, yeah. He made brooms. But anyway, they bought that and they changed it to Pomona Plants and Coffee. So they became like, they kept the plants, but then also they had a cafe, which was a really great opportunity because they were the first cafe to bring my teas in as their like teas.
Got it.
And then I worked at the cafe, which I didn't mind. I love Melissa and Fraser. They're really, really nice people. And I still got to work with the plants, but also washing dishes was a part of that job. That was the part that like, I was like, I don't want to do this so much as watering plants and reading books. But like, obviously, like who, I don't know.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah. And so have you been still teaching classes on and off through this whole period, or have you slowed down?
Last year, I taught classes for most of the year. Like once the pandemic hit, I got online and was teaching through Zoom. I still at this point teach, but I'm kind of like narrowing it in because I'm really trying to focus on tea at this point, which is a whole other thing. But I teach youth. So I still teach mindfulness. I teach like a yoga, mindfulness, and strength class. And then I also teach a mindfulness and art class to middle school youth. But outside, and that's through Next Up, who is an awesome organization, and they pay like really fairly for the work. And so
what's the organization called? Sorry.
Next Up.
Next Step.
Yeah.
Cool.
So they provide after school programs traditionally, like in the schools. So I've worked with them for years through Project Yoga Richmond. And they were really, really quick on transitioning online when things kind of went down. So
got it.
I've been working with them.
That's cool.
It was really helpful. I have no idea like what my life would have looked like without.
Really? So that was like a real anchor for you?
Yeah.
Interesting. So, okay, tell me more about that. So like, what's your relationship like with this organization?
Honestly, so there's Next Step, and they hire providers. And then I work for two different providers, if that makes sense. So like I'm kind of just a plug-in
Mm-hmm.
into the system. So like I work with Project Yoga Richmond as a provider, and I work with the Viz Arts Center.
Which one? Arts 180 or?
The Visual Arts Center.
Oh, the Visual Arts Center. Oh, sorry. Yeah, got it. I know that place.
So those are
got it. That makes sense.
My relationship with for now.
Okay. And so any other, I'm just curious, like, yeah, like, so are there any other sort of like working for other people things to add to this list?
I worked for Lucid Living. That was another place that I worked for a little bit of time.
What's that?
It's like a yoga studio, massage, like a wellness kind of center.
Got it.
I didn't work there for very, very long.
Okay.
And then there's like all the studios that I've worked for. So like at that same time, I was like working for different studios.
Well, and when you say working for different studios, do you mean like teaching classes at different studios?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so this is something I want to ask you about. I remember back when we were like sitting at Lyft having coffee, and you were like steeped in this language of entrepreneurship, self-employment. I'm never going to work for another person. Mm-hmm. And you were sitting at the table explaining to me what you were doing, which was teaching yoga classes at studios. And it felt like at the time you were telling me that that was working for yourself and entrepreneurship. And I was like, but aren't you working for other people essentially as like a subcontractor? And I was like, well, you know, whatever. Hey, you do you. Like, everybody tells their own story. But like, did you hear that in that interview that you listened to?
I don't know if the one that I listened to.
Okay, maybe that was later.
Yeah, that first one, I had just finished the accelerated program, so I wasn't even teaching yet.
Okay, so that's later.
But you are right. I was an independent contractor, which like gives the sense of working for yourself. But you are working for other people and you're getting paid by them. And it's not a model that I like have a problem with if compensated fairly for the time.
But do you feel like you were getting compensated fairly, or is that a question?
I think that I was getting compensated fairly for like the experience that I had.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't, but it's, yeah, like it's not, I guess it feels like entrepreneurship because you still have to have like something that they are paying. So you have to create a pretty small system, which is something that I want to talk to you about because system is something that I'm realizing is the most like important thing.
Interesting. Okay. I want to hear about that.
It's pretty much like, it's a pretty small system that you have to create. You have to create a business name and you have to have like your
I see.
And like there's like a few steps that need to be made to establish yourself as something that can then like go out and be a private contractor. And so again, in my brain, not knowing very much about what it is to like own a business, which I still don't really know that much about, I was like, oh, this is it. These are the only things you have to do. And then people pay you and you have a business. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I remember also at the time, you were pretty adamant that you never wanted to have like a brick and mortar business.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that now?
I still feel that way. Because at this point, that seems like a very large overhead.
Yeah.
To take on, and because like it seems like we're moving even more towards e-commerce. So, but I love the idea of the space, you know, like
Yeah.
I really like community spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a part of one, but I don't know if I need to be the only one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Do you want to talk more about the system stuff?
Yeah. So I guess I'll ask the question and then tell why I'm
Okay.
asking. And like, I'm curious about like if you have any writers or any sources that you feel like explain systems in a good way, uh, because I'm interested. I'm realizing that to have a business, that is what you're doing, is you're creating systems, whether you're replicating systems that already exist, um, or you're trying to innovate the systems that already exist, because like, okay, capitalism in itself is a system. And i I think that I was like I'm both like a part of capitalism and resistant to it at the same time. I don't know how to exist outside of it. But I do think that I can be more intentional with the systems that I put into place so that like I can work towards reducing harm. Um, However, there's all like there, I don't know if you can do it without imprinting some harm in a way. Like, for example, I was looking for teapots. I would like to sell teapots, all right? And you can get teapots from Crate and Barrel, but a teapot from Crate or Barrel is already going to be $50. So that's not something that I'm going to buy to try to resell. So if I wanted to buy teapots at a normal, like at a price that I could resell it at, so at a lower price, there, I would get it. There's a website like Alibaba, or I'll even say like I got it from I got some teapots from Webstaurant, which is like in e-commerce. They sell, you know, teapots, anything that you really want at a cheaper price. And I got like 5 of them to see if they would sell.
Mm-hmm.
And someone bought one. And I was doing some research on it before like sending it out. And I realized that in small print at the bottom of the website, it says, this product may contain this chemical or substance or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
only the state of California says is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
I read that and then I'm just like, well, I'm not gonna sell this to someone then. Like I don't want to do that. And
Totally.
so, I mean, I still have the teapots sitting in
Yeah.
the kitchen, but I'm not selling them, you know. So I guess like going back to systems, it's just like trying to figure out how to lay out foundation that like, yes, can grow, like has an ability to grow, but like also is intentional in ways, or like more mindful in ways to like not perpetuate harm in growth, which is probably going to look slower and is probably going to look smaller and is not going to like make billions of dollars, but like, can it be sustainable for me, and can it possibly sustain a few other people that could help it to grow, is kind of
Mm-hmm.
what I'm like, where I'm at this point. Because
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful what you just said. It makes a perfect sense to me. In terms of, I'm just trying to start with thinking of like, if I could tell you to look at anything, what it would be. The only thing that comes to mind is there's like a body of activism slash feminist practice slash feminist theory called the solidarity economy.
okay.
And there's these thinkers named J.K. Gibson Graham.
The solidarity.
So, the solidarity economy and J.K. Gibson Graham. Let me put it in the chat.
Yeah, that would be. Right.
They wrote a book. It's 2 women. They wrote a book called post-capitalist politics and the end of capitalism as we know it. And they have like a book series. There's like some edited collections of people writing within this sort of like genre. And so it's going to relate to other conversations around like workplace democracy or, you know, this kind of language. But the thing that you just said that I actually don't know if I've ever heard them write about that is incredibly intuitive and smart is harm reduction. What's a harm reduction approach to being both within and against capitalism, or within and out? You know what I mean? That's the perfect way to name it, I think, honestly. Like, really, I appreciate that a lot. Because that's all you can do, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, even thinking systematically, like, so the tea business, once I decided to like focus in on it, it's growing pretty quickly. And like I had to fill 15 units of tea like before we got on this call. Wow. And so like I'm realizing that I'm gonna have to involve other people soon. And when thinking about like having other people involved, like that's where I feel like the first, not even the first, but like harm reduction in the workplace is something like that I mean, I've worked for a lot of different, not a lot of different, but different businesses, and even like a larger company like Lululemon. And it's like, Lululemon has all the rhetoric, like all the wording, you know, to seem like a really great company and really like kind to their people. And they were really pretty good, but there's still harm there. And so there's a big responsibility that comes with that I'm not quite sure yet how to put that together, because I don't know. I think that the hierarchy that happens in like workspaces is not in that effort to reduce harm necessarily. So. Mm-hmm.
Is conducive, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it was either one of the last two conversations we had, you were saying something about like, you know, you had thought about worker cooperatives, but then at the same time, you're not really like in a place right now where there's somebody you specifically want to like be collaborating with. I feel like this conversation feels like an extension of that, maybe. Like, yeah. I don't know. So it's like, it sounds like you're like, I might need more help, but I'm not sure how you structure that relationship in a way that feels good.
Yeah. I love the idea of co-op. Mm-hmm. And I think that finding the people that are also down to do that,
yeah.
And I think I've been in situations where I thought that that's what was happening, but it wasn't. Like there's still, you know, like shared power. I think that it's challenging to, again, create systems that are designed to share power instead of power over, even in wellness spaces or community spaces, like especially when we're modeling it after like systems that already are in place that, you know, don't benefit off of shared power. That's not the intention. Which intellectually I can say, and then I could tomorrow, you know, like again, like hire like 3 people, and then that structure would be there. Like I don't know how to do it, but that's something that.
So I'm not saying anything only because you're saying some really smart shit. and I don't want to twist it. I just want to hear you without you responding to what I want to eventually talk to you about.
Okay.
So I'm just acknowledging my lack of input right now, which is not disinterest, but quite the opposite. I think that what you're saying makes a ton of sense. And I love that you're talking about it in terms of systems, because it's a great way to name the broad problem that you're identifying.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't, like, again, I said, I don't really know. These are just the questions that in my head while I'm trying to like grow something. Cause like the accelerated program that I was a part of, like they were like all about like growth. Like you want to grow and expand and like make money, but like there wasn't a lot of thought about like health, harm reduction, sustainability. Like, and if we don't think about those things, then we're just going to continue to grow things that are like destroying us.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yes. So tell me now, I mean, did you have anything more to say about your like thinking back to that accelerator program, or sort of like that as like the mode of education that you had like tapped into at the end of your VCU career?
I mean, I still think that there was definitely a lot that I learned that benefited me, especially around branding, and that understanding or that idea of a brand, and like having something that people can relate to, because a business like doesn't exist without other people, like without the community that supports it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but as I'm like shifting to the tea and like trying to like push it more, because like I'm realizing, you know, I'm 27. Although I have like job experience, I didn't plug into any type of corporate system. So like if this doesn't work, like I came to the realization at the end of last year that like if this doesn't work out, I will have to go into some sort of entry-level job to like make a living of some sort. So it's like I'm at the point where I can't be afraid of the responsibility of growing, because I have to make a living. I have to exist in capitalism. I have to do it in some capacity.
Yeah. So does that give you a little bit of anxiety? Does that feel like the pressure's on?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the anxiety in owning a business like this.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like I don't necessarily want to just like continue to like mass produce tea at like larger and larger levels until I'm like a warehouse of tea either, you know. But I haven't beyond that.
Yeah. Well, so talk to me about the tea business. What's going on? Is it Roots Holistic still?
So Roots Holistic LLC is like the business, although I need to still file that anyway. Yeah. But so that's like the Roots Holistic is the umbrella that I've been sharing with folks, and then Roots Tea Blends is a facet.
Okay.
Because I would like there to be room for more, if more, like I did last year, I did the yoga and mindfulness under Roots Holistic and the tea under Roots Holistic.
Okay.
So Roots Tea Blend is a facet, and that's what I have been like promoting. So I'm in 5 different cafes right now where like I provide them with the tea that they are going to be sharing with their communities. And I also just like by chance. A lot of this has just been by chance. Like people are reaching out to me, and my mom, who's kind of like part of my business coaching team, is just like, you need to start pitching to people. Like you need to get out there and be on the offense. Like I'm like, okay, like but there's a website called Fair, which is like this e-commerce site for shops to buy products that they're going to put into their stores. And so people have been finding me on there. So now I'm in retail spaces. One is in LA, one is in North Carolina, one is in Pennsylvania. And they've bought once or twice, you know, so we'll see if they buy again. But like, so that is a thing. And I'm
cool. Nice.
Yeah, yes, it's cool. Like the income is really, really great. And like, it's cool to be in different spaces. But again, like I still am not sure the end goal for me is to be a tea supplier for all of America. Like that's not.
Okay.
I'm like, my main mission is to, like my intention is to like use tea as a tool to like inspire more mindful living, and to get people back to the earth. Like I really want to get people like back to like realizing like we need the earth is healing us. And so I feel like tea is a way to kind of get people to connect with that. Like if they know that these are plants that came from the earth and these different plants have medicinal benefits.
So the nuts and bolts of it is I'm guessing, buying a lot of bulk goods, creating blends of teas and packaging them.
Yeah.
Cool. So like, where are you buying your bulk goods from?
I'm getting them from, like from different, depending on what the good is. Cause like there's tea and then there's jars and then there's boxes. So like from different places, but the tea is coming from mostly from Mountain Rose Herbs.
Yeah, I know that site.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a great site. And then I work with one local farmer who I get some of my herbs from.
Nice.
And I would like to have more intimate relationships with the farms that I could, you know. But some of this is coming from overseas.
Yeah. That's interesting. And have you ever thought about wanting to grow your own ingredients?
I'm trying to get into that this year. I've been reaching out to local community gardens because I think that it will probably take me at least 5 years to really like learn how to grow these in the capacity. And then again, the question comes like, well, do you want to be a farmer? Like, or do you want to be a mass produced farmer too? Like, because farming is a lot of work. But I do want to learn, like I want to work more intimately with the plants. Plants are like probably one of like the things that I care about and connect with. Yes, I want to grow things and learn about them, but do I want to have a large commercial farm?
No, right, I hear you. Well, what's the scale of operation right now? So like name a like bulk ingredient that you have to buy from Mountain Rose Herbs.
Ginger.
So like what scale of ginger are you buying right now?
I probably should change this, but it's expensive. But
no, I know that.
I buy like a pound at a time.
Okay.
And that usually will last me. Well, I mean, it used to last me a lot longer, but now like I just made tea and now I need to go back and I need to buy black tea, I need to buy ginger. So I haven't really found.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so is this all just happening in your kitchen?
Yeah, my home kitchen is certified.
Nice. Where you are right now, you certified your kitchen.
Yeah.
How did you do that? What does it require?
Virginia Department of Agriculture is who you have to like contact, and then they send a person that comes out and checks out your space, like where you keep things. Make sure that there's like requirements that you have to have, but
like what are some of the requirements?
You have to have like a sink and like you have to have like a washing area, or like a sink that's large enough to like have like both sanitize and wash.
Okay.
And then you have to have like a closed environment where you're keeping storage. And then like there's like different things if you have animals, but I don't have any animals, so that's great. And then also because my good is dried, there's like a little less like.
Got it. It's not perishable in the same way, sort of.
Yeah, like when I was doing the liquid drinks, like that would have been a whole other thing to try to get.
Sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Wow. So okay, so your kitchen where you are now is certified, so that and so then you basically buy like jars from jar.com and black tea from wherever you're sourcing your teas, and then herbs and stuff from Mountain Rose. Yep. And then you just have like big Tupperwares where all this stuff lives or something?
Yeah, I mean, they're not very big. And again, like I'm getting to a point where I have to scale up, but like, yeah, they're in like 20 ounce, one cabinet that just has like 20 ounce glass jars of like, different.
Nice. That's pretty cool. And so you're feeling like the tea business is working for the moment.
Yeah, it feels more sustainable than the 12 yoga classes a week.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you know. Oh, there's this video that I started watching. I'll send it to you, but it talks about asynchronous and asymmetrical earning versus symmetrical and synchronous earning. It was fascinating, and it has kind of shifted like
interesting
how I'm thinking about business.
Yeah. Sorry, I think Katie's making a smoothie or something. It's like just loud. But that sounds cool. That sounds interesting. Hold on, let me wait. It's like loud on this side. All right, I think it's done. So cool. So that video has like hit you in a good way?
Yeah, she just talks about like if like you're working like a 9-to-5 job, that's like symmetrical and synchronous earning. So like you work for 2 weeks, you get paid for those 2 weeks. She talks about how you can like asymmetrical or asynchronous earning is like you do like a month's work of work, or like for me, like I'll even like it takes me 4 hours to fill like so many jars or whatever, and I do that for like those 4 hours, but then I'm getting paid asymmetrically, like more for like the time. So like trying to work in ways like that, whether it's with a product or with like information.
Yeah, you know, that makes sense.
And like, and that mind, like that frame, like has helped with like trying to work on sustainability.
When you say sustainability, what are you referring to?
I guess getting compensated more for my time.
Okay, got it. Got it. So economically sustainable.
Yeah, yes.
Got it. So let me totally switch topics and ask you to tell me a little bit about this like dive you've taken into thinking about your ancestors.
Yeah, for sure. So the thing that was like fascinating for me to learn, like again, like listening to our past conversation, you had asked me about like where do you think like you get this entrepreneurial spirit from? And I was like, I don't know, I'm just great. And I've now learned that like my grandmother on my mom's side, she was a military wife. So like my grandfather was a general. So she kind of like had that life, but even inside of that life, she started a business called Silk Cocoons, or the Silk Cocoon, where she created silk flowers arrangements.
Silk Cocoon.
The Silk Cocoon, yeah.
The Silk Cocoon.
Mm-hmm. So she did that for a little bit and had like a whole clientele list. And her story is a little bit easier for me to follow because she was also a writer. So she wrote her own autobiography.
Oh, cool.
Super rare, especially I feel like for a Black family to have.
Yeah.
Like a lot of information that I've been kind of pulling from there. But that was one thing that she did. She also like made greeting cards or like cards for folks.
When you say she wrote her own autobiography, is this like a published book or is it like in the family or?
It's not published.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And so
how many copies of it do you think there are?
There's only 2.
There's 2 copies.
I need to like get it copied. But like, so like there's photos too that she included in here.
Amazing.
It's amazing. It's literally a gift. It's called La Ñapa, which means a little something extra.
Say it again, La Ñapa?
La Ñapa, yeah. And then she has in quotes a little something extra.
And what does that mean to her? What's that? Why did she title the book that?
I mean, I don't really know, but I think that I think she probably had the foresight to see that it would be like a little something extra, like, you know, to support or just like preserve history on her end.
Yeah.
Even in that, she talks about other family members. Like she had an aunt who had a business. She painted china. And then she talks about an uncle who owned a barber shop. But those are like more distant relatives. So there's like my grandmother on my mom's side, and then my grandmother on my dad's side was a hairstylist. So she was self-employed.
On dad's side.
She rented out a space and did hair for years there. I actually, like, I had been to it. She had done my hair there. So that was them. And then if we go up a generation, on my mom's side, it was my grandfather. My grandfather's father was a farmer.
Was a farmer, okay.
Maternal great-grandfather.
Yep. So he was a farmer.
He was a farmer, but he also was a butcher. So like they owned land, which was rare for a Black family to own like as much land that they did. And the reason that they owned it was because my grandfather's grandmother had children with her master. So
reason was because your grandfather's
parents.
Yeah.
One was a slave owner, one was a slave.
Okay, was that, let me just write this down. Reason was because that great-grandpa, that's what we're talking about, great-grandfather now, right?
Great-grandfather's parents.
Right, because that great-grandfather's parents were slave and slave owner.
Yeah. And they had multiple children together though, so there was some sort of relationship, and he ended up giving her the land when he passed. Mm-hmm. So that is how like.
And he gave her the land. That's okay.
Yeah. So that's how like that is like my white history on that side of the family, and also how land and resources like came into.
When you say that's my white history, you mean like that's the connection with whiteness, sort of?
Yeah, I mean, like that would be like that great-grandfather would be that's the beginning of white being in, or like how that is inside of me right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting how in this particular case, it came with like that little infusion of wealth, right? In the form of land. That sounds like it probably made a huge difference for your family intergenerationally.
Yeah. I mean, they had land, which at that time was, was, and because they had land, I mean, my grandfather still says they were very poor. He like really like harks on that. He's like, farm work is hard work, and we were still poor. But my great grandfather, so his father would take like the farm animals, I guess, that they had on their land, and had a butcher shop in that local town. But he wasn't successful really because he would give people meat on credit because it was a poor area and a lot of people didn't have a lot of money. So he ended up having to close down because he gave a lot away for free. So, and that's why I was saying, like, my ancestors, like, were self-employed, but weren't trying to, like, mass scale. Like, for my grandfather says, like, for his father, it was about, like, providing for the community. Like, if someone needed something that they had, they would try to share, like, to a certain degree. And they also made sugar syrup. So they grew sugar cane, and they made syrups that they would sell as well.
Interesting.
And
so cool.
It's really, I like think it's really, I mean, it's my history, so of course.
No, I mean, it's such a blessing that you have access to these stories. It's so cool.
It's definitely hard for Black families to like have any type of like hold on history.
Yeah.
My dad's side, his grandfather owned a mobile store.
A mobile store? What do you mean?
So like think like food truck.
Oh, like a mobile, like a moving store. Got it. I was thinking like mobile phones, and I was like, nah, like, I don't think so, Sid.
Not yet. Yeah, like okay, so essentially it was like some sort of truck that he had that he would like, because they lived in Augusta, Georgia. So there was a lot of like rural communities that didn't have stores nearby. And also a lot of people didn't have cars, like vehicles weren't as prevalent as they are today. So he made a business of like stopping by these different neighborhoods, providing like goods and service, or goods mostly.
Basic goods, yeah. Interesting. So that's your dad's grandpa.
Yeah.
Your great grandpa on your dad's side.
Yes.
That makes sense. And then what did your dad's dad end up doing? That like your grandpa generation. That's the general, right?
No, general's on my mom's side.
Oh, the general's on your mom's side. Okay.
Yeah. And on my dad's side, that and the father of my grandmother who ended up owning a hair salon.
Got it. Okay. And so how does it feel to feel connected to these histories?
I mean, I think that it helps put in perspective of like there can be other purposes of being self-employed or owning a business other than becoming like Jeff Bezos. It doesn't have to be like to be a billionaire or to like mass scale and until like the whole thing you've created doesn't exist anymore, I guess. And I think that all of them tie into community in a lot of ways, whether it's like providing a good for the community or providing a hair service, which is a huge thing in the Black community. So I'm trying to kind of channel that into like, okay, so how can what I'm trying to create, like, yes, sustain me and also be contributing in some positive way to the community.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Okay. I mean, this is, it was such a gift here when you said that email out of the blue talking about this, and now hearing you talk more about it, it just makes so much sense to me. Not in a way where it's like obviously, but like I'm like learning from you, but it like fits. It's like you're helping me see things. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like these conversations because it's helpful to.
Well, so let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
This is like me revealing my hand now because I feel like you have been so generous. Do you ever think about the history of things like Black Wall Street, or is that not a term that like is in your? Yeah, tell me.
I mean, yeah, of course.
Okay, so like tell me about it.
Well, like, do I ever think about the idea of like circulating resources and money in the Black community? Because that's what I think about with Black Wall Street.
That's what I want to hear. Yeah.
This idea of like keeping the money in this community and continuing to like circulate it and grow it, which yes, I think about. I think that it's important. I don't really know a way financially, a way out of like oppression and poverty for Black people as a whole without that happening. I don't necessarily know yet how to create a business that is doing that for the Black community, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. Do you, but I mean, is that like, is that sort of like a part of what you're thinking about when you're thinking about the kind of business you want, or the systems approach to what you're thinking about, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, like if I'm thinking a little bit further out, I would love to figure out a way to create a system or a model where I am employing, yes, young Black people, so that there can be money that's circulating in. But I've done mentorship different times, like throughout my life at this point, and I would really like it to be like an educational space where like I want them obviously to learn how to like do the job, which is pretty simple, like, but like to learn about plants and herbs if that's something that they want to learn about, but then also to learn about like how do you take an idea and create something that can work for you. So like ideally, like it would be great to be able to employ people for a certain period of time for them to like make money, to learn, and then to move on, you know, like and continue to like to learn what I learned, like the accelerated entrepreneurship idea, but like in a model again that is more like.
Yeah. Well, you know, I have to say, like you reflecting on this, I feel like you're starting to maybe play around with some of the ideas around how to think about that relationship in a less, what did we call it? In a less like harmful way, right?
Yeah.
Like a mentorship relationship is a way to think about a differential in power that's maybe less harmful, or that's not harmful.
Right. Which is like great in theory, but then like when it comes to like, okay, but there also needs to be a product that comes out that meets,
Totally.
like, you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like that's where it's just like, okay.
Right.
But I think that mindfulness plays into that. And so like, I think that it's something that can be taught, like, okay, we need to be like present and mindful for this process. But again, it's theory at this point. I haven't put it into.
Totally. Yeah, no, it makes sense. But it's like it's like one of the ways you're thinking, which makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, so I mean, just to reveal my hand, like,
please, I would love to.
Yeah, so Here's, well, okay, so the goal with a book like this is to not just be like telling what these students are or what these young, adults are, but like listening to them and like pulling out the theorizing that you all are doing. You know what I mean? So it's like the goal is to like lift up your thoughts, not just to be like, here's these kids who think they're hot shit or whatever, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. Which is easier for some people than others, right? So like some people feel like they're very much caricatures, but then other people, even beneath that caricature, there's just like wisdom. Like, even young people are allowed to be a little bit wise or like a little bit smart and critical about the world they live in. It's like, and so the thing that you're saying right now fits into a huge part of the end of the book, which is, let me just try and articulate this well. So on the one hand, we felt like you and a few other women, to be honest, mostly women, felt like the model of business that you were interested in was not exactly the model of business that the pre-accelerators and that these entrepreneurial networks wanted to encourage you all to pursue, right? Growth, growth, growth. Become Jeff Bezos of tea or whatever, right? And so, you're not the only one that like felt a little bit of friction with that model. Still learning and appreciating parts of it, right? But having to figure out that sort of like, well, but it's not quite right or something. And so on the one hand, there's a sense that like people don't always want to just be like a growth business, right? And then there's this other sort of side of it, which is like, and here it's not necessarily predominantly women, but it was predominantly African-American students who expressed things that we're grouping under this concept of Black Wall Street, but have a lot to do with what you're talking about right now, which is like, well, sometimes you can think about business as like part of a community and the goal being to support community, not to just like make abstract wealth or to just like, boost yourself up. And that like, even when you just said like, I don't understand how Black folks are going to get out of intergenerational poverty without doing this. It's like, that is like a necessary observation that I think leads to a specific understanding, pragmatic and political understanding of what entrepreneurship can do, which is like, listen, we got to create an ecosystem of like Black businesses that help Black people and lift our community up and like do it in a way that feels like not harmful, more or less, right? So like we've actually, so there was one student in particular that like told us about Black Wall Street and his, interpretation of why it mattered to him as like a imaginary or like a point of departure. And then I hear it in other folks and like the things he was expressing. I'm like, yeah, I feel like, Sid's saying something very, very parallel to that, or this other person is saying something very parallel to that. So there's like a nice group of you all who are like helping us see this as like as like a form of like Black radicalism, just to be honest. The trick though, is that this form of Black radicalism also gets articulated as like Black neoliberalism, where there's another version of it, which is like very much like, yeah, like, we got to be capitalists too. We got to like have, the Black Jeff Bezos or whatever, right? And so there's like a flip there where it's like, you can't just flatten it all and see like, oh, these are just a bunch of Black neoliberal thoughts. It's not that. It could become that, right? If and I'm sure there are people that do that, but that's not what these students, I think, are telling us, or what you're telling us, which I feel like, so that's a big piece of it. Does that make sense? Then and this is where when you talked about the system stuff, it's just like you're like right there with us, because one of the things we want to, I think, argue at the end of the book is like one of the big missing pieces in this entrepreneurship education is, to use your language, is that they're not creatively helping students think through the systems that they are creating, which is to say, like they're sort of providing you a de facto or default like cookie cutter version of what a business is, but you all, I think, are much more interested in a wider variety of systems or of businesses, or maybe not even businesses, just systems that that you weren't given, I don't think, as much help imagining and structuring through those sort of entrepreneurship education projects, right? So it's like they're not helping you understand the variety of ways you might interact with collaborators or with employees, or the ways that you might think otherwise about sort of like being, you know, creative in a world that's not just you. And so that to us is sort of like one of the things we want to identify as like a big missing piece in these entrepreneurship programs, which is like these kids are learning a lot, these students are learning a lot, but there's this whole other thing that they also could be supported in learning that is currently not being supported.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
Like, I think
cool.
I'm just now making the connection between like business and systems, which is wild, because like, again, like a business is, I feel like, a collection of systems that a person creates or create.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And when you start thinking about it in systems, it makes you focus on the relationships, right? It's like a relational form. And that's, and so even like taking money from somebody is a relationship, right? Like all of it is a relationship. And so thinking about it in those terms.
And is that what you think about when you think about systems? You think about relationships, like
I do personally, yeah. So like when you say systems, I'm like, yes, that's a great way to talk about like the relationality of these things. That it's like multiple pieces in relation to one another. Like your teas are in relation to your kitchen, or in relation to you, or in relation to these websites, or in relation to, you know, whatever, the shop in LA, are in relation to your partner who has to watch you do all this. Like all this is a big system, right? Yeah. So I think about, when you say systems, that's where my brain goes, at least.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I just love it. Like, it's just so helpful to hear you articulate all this stuff, because I'd like to believe that we're in agreement. So it's good to hear you like listen to me and be like, yeah, it all makes sense. Cause like I feel like it's going to be like, our goal is going to be to try and like make these claims through the like wisdom of people like you being like, this is how I'm trying to think about this stuff, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's interesting. And I do have to go.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Like, this is really interesting though.
Oh, it's so fun.
But that women that
he just wants me to go too. Sorry, go ahead.
That women that you noticed, that it was like the women that you interviewed who were pointing out that the growth, just like grow isn't necessarily what they wanted, or isn't sustainable. And we've talked about it before, but I do think that like the model of business, or like the traditional system or structure of business, is like was created by men, I guess, honestly, especially in this country. And I think that it has like a very masculine, which doesn't have to be, like gender doesn't belong to that, but like this very masculine energy, or sun energy of production, of moving forward. And so I personally believe that when a woman, or like someone who is in tune with more of that like feminine energy, or fluidity or receptive energy on the other end of that, it opens up this different perspective of what business system or relationships could be in regards to like existing in this world.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, and basically, like, I have to say, like, you articulated it in a I'm not trying to say like this is something that's already been said, but I think that would resonate with that J.K. Gibson Graham world, because that's very much their feminist critique of the way that we critique capitalism. Even they're like, basically like, y'all just see this like masculine world, but what you're not seeing is like all these feminist or feminized projects and ways of being reciprocal and in the world that don't just fit neatly into these like narratives of like capitalism is evil and, you know, business is this. And it's like, well, there's like other ways that people are in business, and there's other ways that people are, you know, working despite capitalism or in the like margins. And like, you have to pay attention to that as well, and maybe see if there's like post-capitalist possibilities that emerge from those spaces.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of the idea of that world and that work.
Cool. I'm excited to check it out. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's go. Listen, we'll talk again soon. It's always so much fun to chat with you. And Goose is clearly done with our phone call.
Yes.
He does this when I'll be like working, and he'll be like, yeah, it's my time. And he'll just like get on my lap, and then he just like sits there. So sometimes I can get a little bit more work done like this. He'll just like sit, be like, I'm good. Keep going. It's nuts. Oh my God. I know.
Well, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, likewise, Sid. This is the best. I really appreciate talking with you always. We'll talk again soon.
Yes. Keep me updated with the book and everything.
I will. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Have a good one. Bye-bye.